A homeless teenage girl quietly paid for an elderly couple's dinner with the last money she had in the world. She thought they were simply two struggling seniors who couldn't afford their meal. What she didn't know was that the couple she helped were actually billionaires secretly traveling the country in disguise. And when they discovered what she had done, what they did next shocked the entire diner and completely changed her life forever. But to understand why that moment became so powerful, we have to go back to the beginning, because the girl who gave away her last $10 had already lost almost everything. And yet, she still chose kindness. Cold wind drifted through the quiet streets as 17-year-old Aaliyah Carter sat beneath the dim light of a bus stop shelter. The metal bench beneath her was freezing, but she had grown used to discomfort. Her small backpack rested beside her, the only belonging she still owned in the world. Inside were just a few simple things: 2 worn shirts, a notebook filled with memories, and a small photograph of her mother. Aaliyah gently pulled the photo out and looked at it for a moment. Her mother's warm smile stared back at her. For a second, the cold street disappeared. For a second, she was home again. Just 3 months earlier, life had been completely different. Back then, she and her mother lived in a tiny apartment on the 3rd floor of an aging building. The place wasn't fancy. The walls were chipped. The kitchen sink leaked. And the heater barely worked in winter. But it was still home. Every evening after school, Aaliyah worked a small part-time job at a grocery store down the street. Her mother worked 2 jobs cleaning offices and helping at a nursing home. They were always tired, always stretching every dollar. But their small apartment was always filled with laughter. Sometimes they would sit at the tiny kitchen table eating cheap noodles while her mother told stories about the future. "Aaliyah," her mother would say with a smile, "one day you're going to do amazing things." Aaliyah would laugh and shake her head. "I just want us to be okay." Her mother would squeeze her hand gently. "We will be." But life doesn't always keep its promises. One night her mother came home early from work, looking pale and exhausted. "I think I just need some rest," she said softly. But the next morning she could barely stand. Within days, hospital visits began. Doctors, tests, long waiting rooms filled with quiet anxiety. And then came the words that shattered everything. The illness was serious. Very serious. Medical bills began piling up faster than either of them could understand. Aaliyah tried to stay strong. She worked extra hours. She studied in hospital waiting rooms. She smiled even when fear filled her chest. But some battles cannot be won with determination alone. One quiet evening, sitting beside the hospital bed, Aaliyah held her mother's hand tightly. Her mother looked weaker than she ever had before. But her eyes were still filled with love. "Aaliyah, she whispered gently. "Yes, Mom. No matter what happens. Promise me something." Aaliyah nodded quickly, already feeling tears forming. "Anything." Her mother squeezed her hand softly. "Never let this world make your heart hard." Aaliyah swallowed. "I won't." Her mother smiled faintly. "Kindness will always find its way back to you, even when life feels unfair." Those were the last words she ever heard from her mother. The funeral came quickly. And after the funeral, reality arrived. Without her mother's income, rent went unpaid. Aaliyah tried everything she could. She begged the landlord for time. She explained she was still in school. She promised she would find a way. But the landlord had heard too many stories before. 2 weeks later, a notice was taped to the door. She had to leave. Just like that, the home filled with memories was gone. Since then, Aaliyah had been surviving day by day. Sometimes she found space at youth shelters. Other nights she stayed at bus stations. And some nights she simply walked the streets until morning came. But through everything, one thing remained strong inside her. Her mother's words. "Kindness will always find its way back to you." Those words echoed in her mind now as she looked down at the crumpled bills in her hand. $10. That was everything she had left. Her stomach growled painfully. She hadn't eaten all day. Across the street, warm yellow lights glowed from a small roadside diner. Through the windows she could see people eating hot meals. Steam rising from bowls. Coffee mugs warming hands. The smell of fresh food drifted faintly through the cold air. Aaliyah stared for a moment. $10 might buy a small bowl of soup. Maybe a sandwich if she was lucky. Her stomach growled again. Finally, she stood up. Grabbing her backpack, she crossed the quiet street and pushed open the diner door. A bell chimed softly. Warm air wrapped around her immediately. Inside, the diner was cozy and calm. A few customers sat scattered across booths. A waitress carried plates from the kitchen. Soft music played quietly from a radio. Aaliyah slipped into a booth near the window and opened the menu. Her eyes scanned every item carefully. Soup, $6. Grilled cheese, $7. Coffee, $2. She did the math quietly in her head. She had to be careful. That $10 needed to last. That was when she noticed them. Just 2 booths away sat an elderly couple. The man had neatly combed silver hair and wore an old brown coat. His hands trembled slightly as he held the menu. Across from him sat a woman with kind eyes and a gentle smile. But something about them seemed different. Not poor. Not wealthy. Just tired. Aaliyah tried not to stare. But their quiet conversation drifted across the diner. "Maybe we should just share one meal," the woman whispered softly. "That will be enough." The man sighed quietly. "I wish we could order more." Something inside Aaliyah's chest tightened instantly. She recognized that tone. It was the voice of someone pretending they weren't hungry. Pretending everything was fine. Soon the waitress placed their bill on the table. The elderly woman slowly opened a small coin purse. She began counting loose change carefully. 1 coin. 2. 3. But it wasn't enough. She looked up at the man apologetically. "We're short," she whispered. The man rubbed his forehead quietly. Aaliyah looked down at her own money again. $10. It was everything she had. That money meant food tonight. Maybe breakfast tomorrow. Her stomach growled loudly again. But something inside her heart refused to ignore what she had just seen. Before she could talk herself out of it, Aaliyah stood up. She walked quietly to the cashier. Her hands trembled slightly as she placed the crumpled bills on the counter. "Please," she said softly, "use this to pay for the couple in that booth." The cashier blinked in surprise. "You sure about that?" Aaliyah nodded gently. "They need it more than me." What Aaliyah didn't know was that the elderly couple sitting there were actually Arthur and Evelyn Whitmore, a billionaire couple who had built one of the largest technology empires in the country. And they had been quietly traveling across the country, observing everyday life far away from wealth and headlines. When they saw what the homeless girl had just done, they looked at each other in complete disbelief, because they knew one thing instantly. A girl who would give away her last $10 was someone truly extraordinary, and what they were about to do next would change Aaliyah Carter's life forever. Before we continue with this incredible journey, I spent countless hours researching and crafting this story to bring you something truly meaningful. If stories like this touch your heart and you want to see more acts of kindness that restore faith in humanity, please subscribe and hit the notification bell. It truly means the world to me and helps these powerful stories reach more people who need them. Now, let's see what happens next. Have you ever witnessed an act of kindness that completely changed your perspective? Share your story in the comments below. I'd love to read it. The waitress had barely finished collecting the coins from the elderly couple's table when the cashier leaned over and whispered something to her. The waitress glanced toward Aaliyah, then toward the couple, then back to Aaliyah again. A quiet confusion passed across her face. Finally, she walked over to the elderly couple and gently placed the $10 on their table. "The young lady by the window paid the rest of your bill," she said softly. For a moment, the couple didn't react. Arthur Whitmore slowly looked up. "Excuse me, what?" The waitress pointed gently toward the window booth. Arthur and Evelyn both turned. Across the diner sat Aaliyah, staring quietly out the window as if nothing unusual had happened. Arthur leaned back slowly in his chair. She did that?" he asked. The waitress nodded. She insisted. Evelyn placed her hand over her mouth. For several seconds, neither of them spoke. Arthur Whitmore had spent decades surrounded by wealth, boardrooms, and powerful executives. He had seen charity events, billion-dollar donations, and carefully staged acts of generosity. But this was different, because the girl who helped them clearly had almost nothing. Arthur noticed the worn backpack beside her, her thin jacket, the way she studied the menu like every dollar mattered. And yet she had given away the little she had. Evelyn whispered softly, "Arthur, we have to talk to her." Arthur nodded slowly. They both stood and walked toward Aaliyah's booth. Aaliyah looked up when she noticed someone approaching. Her first instinct was panic. Had she done something wrong? Had the cashier misunderstood? But when she saw the couple smiling gently, her shoulders relaxed slightly. Evelyn spoke first. "Excuse me, dear." Aaliyah straightened. "Yes, ma'am." Evelyn's voice was warm. "We were told you paid part of our bill." Aaliyah shifted slightly in her seat. "Oh, it wasn't much." Arthur pulled out the chair across from her. "May we sit for a moment?" Aaliyah hesitated, but something about their calm presence made her nod. "Okay." They sat. Arthur studied her carefully. "What's your name?" "Aaliyah." "That's a beautiful name," Evelyn said. "Thank you." Arthur glanced down at the $10 still lying on the table. "You gave us this money." Aaliyah shrugged slightly. "You looked like you needed it." Arthur raised an eyebrow. "And you didn't." For the first time, Aaliyah looked uncomfortable. She tried to smile. "I'm okay." Arthur noticed the answer immediately. Not "I'm fine." Not "I'm good." Just, "I'm okay." People who truly had stability rarely used that phrase. Evelyn leaned forward gently. "Have you eaten yet tonight?" Aaliyah hesitated. She didn't want pity. "I was about to order something small." Arthur waved the waitress over immediately. "3 bowls of soup, please." Aaliyah quickly shook her head. "Oh no, that's not necessary." Arthur smiled calmly. "I insist." The waitress nodded and walked away. Aaliyah looked down at the table. "You didn't have to do that." Arthur folded his hands. "And you didn't have to help us." The diner remained quiet around them. For a moment nobody spoke. Then Evelyn asked softly, "Do you live around here?" Aaliyah's fingers tightened slightly on the edge of the table. She wasn't used to talking about her situation, but something about Evelyn's gentle voice made the words come out slowly. "I used to." Arthur listened closely. "What happened?" Aaliyah took a small breath. "My mom got sick." The words felt heavier every time she said them. "She passed away 3 months ago." Evelyn's eyes softened immediately. "Oh, sweetheart dash." Aaliyah continued quietly. "We couldn't keep the apartment after that." Arthur leaned forward slightly. "Where are you staying now?" Aaliyah hesitated, then answered honestly, "Wherever I can." Arthur and Evelyn exchanged a glance. Not the dramatic, shocked look most people would give, but a quiet, thoughtful one. Because they had spent months traveling the country trying to understand the struggles people faced every day. But seeing it up close, sitting across the table from a 17-year-old girl who had just given away her last $10, made it painfully real. The waitress arrived with the soup. Steam rose from the bowls. Aaliyah hadn't realized how hungry she was until the smell reached her. Arthur noticed. "Go ahead," he said kindly. Aaliyah picked up the spoon carefully. The warmth spread through her body immediately. For the first time that day, her stomach stopped aching. Evelyn smiled gently. "Better." Aaliyah nodded. "Yeah." Arthur watched her quietly. "You know something, Aaliyah?" "What?" "In all my years, I've rarely seen generosity like yours." Aaliyah looked confused. "It was just $10. Arthur shook his head slowly. "No." He leaned forward slightly. "It wasn't. Because generosity isn't measured by how much you give." He paused. It's measured by how much you sacrifice to give it. Aaliyah didn't know how to respond. Nobody had ever described her actions like that before. Evelyn reached across the table and gently placed something beside Aaliyah's bowl. A small card. "If you ever need help," Evelyn said softly, "call this number." Aaliyah looked down at the card. It simply had a name and a phone number. Arthur Whitmore. No company logo. No explanation. Just a name. Aaliyah looked up again. "Thank you, but I'll be okay." Arthur smiled. "I believe you will." He paused. "But strong people still deserve support." Aaliyah slipped the card into her backpack. "Thank you." Arthur stood. "Well, Aaliyah, it was truly an honor meeting you." Evelyn added softly, "Your mother would be very proud of you." Aaliyah's eyes filled slightly with emotion. "Thank you." Arthur and Evelyn walked toward the door. But before leaving, Arthur quietly spoke to the diner manager. The manager nodded respectfully. The couple left into the cold night. Across the diner, Aaliyah finished the last spoonful of soup. She felt warm, full, and strangely hopeful. She assumed she had simply met two kind strangers. What she didn't know was that Arthur Whitmore had just given the manager a very specific instruction. "Make sure that girl has a meal here every day. And send me the bill." The manager nodded. Of course. Arthur looked back once through the diner window. Aaliyah was sitting alone again. Quiet. Humble. Completely unaware that the small act of kindness she had shown tonight had just caught the attention of one of the most powerful people in the country. And Arthur Whitmore had a feeling. This would not be the last time their paths crossed. Not even close. Because sometimes, one simple act of kindness is the beginning of a story no one could ever imagine. The next morning, Aaliyah woke up before sunrise on the same cold bus stop bench. Her neck ached. Her fingers were numb from the night air. But for the first time in weeks, she didn't wake up feeling completely empty. The warm bowl of soup from the diner still lingered in her memory. It wasn't just the food. It was the kindness. The way Arthur and Evelyn had spoken to her like she mattered. Like she was more than just a homeless girl people walked past. She reached into her backpack and pulled out the small card Evelyn had given her. Arthur Whitmore. Just a name and a number. No explanation. No company logo. Aaliyah stared at it for a moment, then slipped it back into the notebook where she kept the photo of her mother. She didn't want to call. Not yet. She didn't want to feel like a burden. So instead, she stood up, slung her backpack over her shoulder, and began walking through the quiet morning streets. Later that afternoon, hunger pulled her back to the small diner across the street. She hesitated at the door. What if they didn't want her there again? But the bell chimed as she stepped inside. The same waitress from the night before looked up and immediately smiled. "Well, hey there." Aaliyah smiled nervously. "Hi." The waitress pointed toward a booth. "Go ahead and sit down." Aaliyah opened the menu again, carefully checking prices. The waitress walked over. "What would you like today?" Aaliyah pointed to the cheapest thing she saw. "Just the soup again." The waitress smiled knowingly. "Coming right up." When the soup arrived, Aaliyah ate slowly, savoring every bite. When she finished, she nervously walked to the cashier with the few dollars she had left. But the cashier shook his head. "It's already taken care of." Aaliyah frowned. "What do you mean?" He smiled. "Someone paid for your meals." Aaliyah's mind immediately went to Arthur and Evelyn. "But they're not here." The cashier shrugged. "They made arrangements." Aaliyah stood there silently for a moment. No one had ever done something like that for her before. She whispered softly, "Thank you." Across town, in a quiet hotel suite, Arthur Whitmore stood by the window looking over the city. Evelyn sat at a small table reading through notes. "Did she come back?" Evelyn asked. Arthur checked his phone. "Yes." Evelyn smiled gently. "Good." Arthur turned toward her. "You know we can't just leave her out there." Evelyn nodded slowly. "I know. Arthur had spent decades building one of the most successful technology companies in the country. But in the last few years, something had begun to bother him deeply. Despite all the wealth in the world, so many people were still suffering. That was why he and Evelyn had been traveling quietly across the country. No media, no announcements, just observing life, trying to understand how they could help people in ways that truly mattered. And now, they had found someone extraordinary. Evelyn folded her hands thoughtfully. She reminds me of your sister. Arthur's expression softened. His younger sister had grown up with the same kind of kindness, always helping others even when she had very little. Arthur nodded slowly. Yes, she does. Over the next few weeks, Aaliyah continued visiting the diner. She never ordered much. Just soup. Sometimes a sandwich. Human kindness. Arthur leaned forward again. Aaliyah, I want to make you an offer. She stared at him nervously. What kind of offer? Arthur pointed toward her notebook. You have real talent. He opened the folder again. Inside was another document. A full scholarship. Aaliyah blinked. For what? Arthur smiled. For one of the best design schools in the country. Her mouth fell open. That's impossible. Arthur shook his head. No. He pushed the document toward her. It's already approved. Aaliyah stared at the paper. Tuition. Covered. Housing covered. Living expenses. Covered. She whispered. You're serious? Arthur nodded. You'll focus on your education. And when you're ready, we'd like you to join our company's design team. Aaliyah's hands started trembling. Her entire life was changing in front of her. All because of a single decision she made in that diner. Evelyn smiled warmly. Kindness has a funny way of finding its way back. Aaliyah suddenly started crying. Not quiet tears, but deep, overwhelming emotion. Arthur waited patiently. When she finally spoke, her voice was shaking. My mom always said something like that. Arthur smiled. She was right. Arthur stood up. Come with us. They walked to the front of the diner. The staff looked confused. Arthur turned to the manager. I'd like everyone to gather for a moment. Curious customers looked up from their tables. The manager nodded. Arthur placed his hand gently on Aaliyah's shoulder. This young woman dash. He paused. Paid for our meal here a few weeks ago. The customers murmured quietly. Arthur continued. She believed we were struggling seniors. A few people smiled. Arthur finished. But what she didn't know dash was that she had just shown more generosity than many wealthy people ever do. He looked around the diner. So today we're returning the favor. Arthur turned to Aaliyah. Your education is now fully funded. The entire diner went silent. Aaliyah stood frozen. Arthur continued. You now have a safe home. And a future career. Gasps filled the room. One of the waitresses started crying. Another customer began clapping. Within seconds, the entire diner erupted in applause. Aaliyah couldn't believe what was happening. Arthur whispered softly to her. You changed your life the moment you chose kindness. Months later, Aaliyah walked back into the same diner again. But this time, everything was different. She wore a warm coat. Her backpack now held textbooks instead of survival items. The waitress recognized her instantly. Aaliyah. Aaliyah smiled. Hi. She ordered soup again. Old habits. But when she finished, she walked quietly to another booth. At that table sat a tired-looking single mother and her young son. They were counting coins. Aaliyah smiled gently. She walked to the counter and placed money down. Please pay for their meal. The cashier smiled knowingly. Of course. As Aaliyah left the diner, she looked up at the sky. Her mother's words echoed in her heart. Kindness will always find its way back to you. And now, Aaliyah was making sure that kindness continued traveling forward. This story proves how one small act of kindness can change someone's entire life. So let me ask you something. What's one act of kindness you could do for someone this week? Maybe helping a stranger, supporting someone struggling, or simply offering encouragement. Share your commitment in the comments below. You might inspire someone else to do the same. 5 years passed. The small roadside diner on that quiet street was still there. The same bell still chimed when the door opened. The same smell of warm soup and coffee filled the air. But one thing had changed. A framed photo now hung proudly on the wall behind the counter. In the picture stood a smiling young woman wearing a graduation gown. Beside her were two familiar faces, Arthur and Evelyn Whitmore. Under the photo was a small plaque that read, "Kindness changed everything." The girl in the photo was Aaliyah Carter, and her life had transformed in ways she once believed were impossible. After receiving the Whitmore Scholarship, Aaliyah enrolled in one of the top design schools in the country. At first, the transition was overwhelming. She had spent months just trying to survive on the streets. Now she was surrounded by classrooms, professors, and opportunities she had never imagined. There were nights she felt out of place, moments when self-doubt whispered that she didn't belong. But every time those doubts appeared, Aaliyah remembered something Arthur told her during her first semester. "Never forget," he said. "You earned your place here the moment you chose kindness." And slowly she began to believe it. Her talent flourished. Her creativity grew. Her designs started winning competitions and gaining attention across the campus. By the time she graduated, she had already received multiple job offers. But Aaliyah only accepted one, Arthur Whitmore's company. Not because she felt obligated, but because she wanted to help build something meaningful, something that could impact people the way Arthur and Evelyn had impacted her. Within a few years, Aaliyah became one of the youngest creative directors the company had ever hired. But despite her success, she never forgot where she came from. Every month, without fail, Aaliyah returned to the same diner. The staff knew her well now, not as the homeless girl who once walked through the door with $10, but as someone who never stopped caring about others. She always sat at the same booth by the window, ordered the same soup, and quietly paid for someone else's meal before leaving. Sometimes it was a struggling student, sometimes a tired worker, sometimes a family counting coins. She never asked for recognition. She never told them her story, because to her, kindness wasn't about attention. It was about impact. One evening, the diner owner asked her something. "Aaliyah, why do you keep doing this?" She smiled softly. "Because someone once did the same thing for me." There was another tradition Aaliyah kept every year. On the anniversary of her mother's passing, she visited the small park where she used to sit during difficult nights. She brought fresh flowers, and the same photograph she had carried in her backpack during those months of uncertainty. But one year she brought something new, a small plaque. She placed it beside the bench where she once slept. It read, "In memory of the woman who taught me that kindness always finds its way back." Below that line were 3 words, Aaliyah Carter Foundation. Because by that point, Aaliyah had started a program that helped homeless teens find education, housing, and mentorship, just like she once needed, just like someone had once given her. Arthur and Evelyn proudly supported the foundation, but they always told reporters the same thing whenever they were asked about it. "This story didn't start with us," Arthur would say. "It started with a girl who gave away $10. Stories like this remind us of something incredibly powerful. Kindness doesn't require wealth. It doesn't require status. And it doesn't require perfect circumstances. Sometimes the most powerful act of kindness comes from someone who has almost nothing. Aaliyah didn't help Arthur and Evelyn because she expected anything in return. She helped them because her mother had taught her something simple but life-changing. Never let the world make your heart hard. And because she lived by that belief. Her kindness didn't just change her life. It created a ripple effect that would go on helping thousands of people. All from one small moment. One simple decision. $10. Stories like this remind us that extraordinary kindness exists all around us. If this story touched your heart, please take a moment to like this video. It helps more people discover these inspiring stories. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss another story that restores faith in humanity. But most importantly, look for opportunities in your own life to be someone's unexpected blessing. You never know how one small act of kindness might change someone's entire world. So tell me in the comments, what act of kindness will you perform this week? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Thank you for watching. And remember, you have the power to change someone's life, sometimes with something as simple as $10.